You come home. You already know before you've even looked around. There's something in the way your dog is moving. Head low, ears back, eyes looking at you but somehow avoiding you at the same time. Maybe they're slinking toward you, tail wagging low and slow, belly almost touching the ground. And before you've even found the mess, before you've seen the garbage scattered across the kitchen floor or the pillow that no longer exists in any recognizable form, you think, I know. I know exactly what they did. This is one of the most striking moments in dog ownership. The guilty look is so expressive, so human, so seemingly deliberate that millions of people film it, share it, watch it, and laugh at it. The dog that ate the cat's food, the dog that destroyed the sofa, the dog making eye contact with its owner while the evidence is literally still on its face. These videos go viral because the expression is so readable. It so obviously shows they know they're guilty. Yet behavioral science has been studying this specific moment for over 15 years. And when researchers actually tested this in controlled experiments, what they found overturns almost everything most owners believe. Your dog is not feeling guilty. And understanding what they're actually feeling instead changes everything about how you should respond. Let's start with what guilt actually requires, because this is where the science gets precise in a way that matters. Guilt, as psychologists define it, is a secondary emotion, not a primary one. Primary emotions like fear, joy, anger, and disgust are immediate, reflexive, and well documented across mammals. Secondary emotions like guilt, shame, pride, and embarrassment require something else entirely. What researchers call theory of mind. The capacity to understand that another individual has beliefs, expectations, and a perspective different from your own. To feel guilty, you have to be able to imagine how your behavior looked from someone else's point of view. You have to build a mental model of another consciousness, compare your actions against that model, and generate a negative self-evaluation based on the gap between what you did and what that other being expected. That's not a simple thing. In humans, theory of mind develops around age 4. Before that age, children fail classic tests of perspective taking. They genuinely cannot grasp that another person might believe something different from what they themselves know. The question of whether dogs have theory of mind has been studied extensively. The answer is complex, but here's what we can say today. Dogs are extraordinarily skilled at reading human social cues. Gaze direction, pointing gestures, body posture, emotional expression. In many of these skills, they outperform even chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives. But reading cues from another being is not the same as modeling that being's internal mental states. One is social sensitivity. The other is full perspective taking. And the evidence that dogs possess the second capacity, the one required to experience guilt as humans understand it, simply isn't there. So if this look isn't guilt, what is it? Alexandra Horowitz is a cognitive scientist at Barnard College at Columbia University, where she runs the Dog Cognition Lab. In 2009, she published one of the most cited studies in animal behavior, specifically designed to test the guilty look in a controlled setting. Here's what she did. She brought together 14 dogs and their owners. She instructed the owners to forbid the dogs from eating a treat placed on the floor, then leave the room. While the owners were gone, Horowitz either gave the treat to the dog or removed it herself. Then the owners came back. The critical detail was this: some owners were told their dog had eaten the treat when it hadn't. Others were told their dog hadn't eaten it when it actually had. And some were given accurate information. She then filmed the reunions and had trained observers score the dogs for guilty behavior: gaze aversion, body lowering, tail tucking, ear flattening, the full behavioral package. The result was unambiguous. The guilty look was not predicted by whether the dog had actually eaten the treat. It was predicted entirely by how the owner behaved upon returning. When owners believed their dog had misbehaved, even when the dog had done nothing wrong, the dog showed more guilty behavior. Dogs that had actually eaten the treat but whose owners were told they hadn't showed almost none of the classic guilty display at all. The look had nothing to do with what the dog had done. Everything had to do with what the dog was reading in the owner's face, posture, and tone of voice. Now things get even more interesting, because this finding raises an obvious question. If dogs are responding to human cues rather than their own internal sense of guilt, what exactly are they responding to? What emotion is actually driving this behavior? The answer lies in fear, specifically appeasement behavior triggered by threat signals. To understand this properly, you need to know something about how dog communication evolved. Dogs descended from wolves, social animals that live in complex group structures. Within those groups, conflict is costly. Physical fighting burns energy, causes injury, and disrupts the cooperation the group depends on. So wolves and dogs after them evolved an elaborate repertoire of appeasement signals designed to de-escalate tension before it becomes conflict. Body lowering, gaze aversion, tail tucking, ear flattening, slow, exaggerated movement, exposed belly. These signals communicate, in behavioral terms, I am not a threat, please do not escalate. I am making myself smaller and more vulnerable to show you I am not challenging you. When you walk into a room with a stiffened posture, a changed tone of voice, a particular expression on your face, your dog reads all of it instantly. They are extraordinarily fast at this. Research shows that dogs can distinguish between a happy and an angry human face in under 200 milliseconds. They don't need to wait for you to speak. They know something has shifted in the social atmosphere of the room before you've done anything you're consciously aware of doing. And when they detect threat signals, they deploy appeasement behavior. Not because they've reconstructed the causal chain between what they did 3 hours ago and your current emotional state, but because something in their environment is signaling danger, and they have a well-practiced response to danger signals from the person they're most attached to. What looks like guilt is actually the behavioral output of a fear response, filtered through a social communication system designed to prevent conflict. We need to pause here and let the weight of this sink in, because the practical implications are enormous. If your dog is displaying the guilty look in response to threat signals from you, rather than from their own internal memory of past behavior, then the punishment you're about to deliver is not being received the way you think it is. Most owners, when they encounter a mess, immediately connect it to what they believe their dog is feeling. The dog looks guilty, therefore the dog knows. And if they know, punishment is appropriate. You're correcting a behavior the dog understands was wrong. But what's actually happening is different. Your dog is not connecting your anger to an action they performed hours ago. Dogs have a short associative window for connecting cause and effect. Research suggests this window is at most a few minutes for behavioral associations. After that, the connection is gone. What they connect your anger to is right now. Your current emotional state, your arrival, possibly your tone of voice, possibly the way you walked into the room. This is exactly what the Royal Veterinary College's Generation Pup study showed, which we've covered in relation to separation anxiety. Dogs whose owners came home and responded to damage with visible distress were 6 times more likely to develop behavioral problems. The dog doesn't link frustration to the destroyed cushion. They link it to the homecoming itself, and gradually homecomings become something to brace for in advance. There is a follow-up study to Horowitz's original work that gets cited less often but is arguably more illuminating. In 2012, a research team in Hungary replicated the basic design with some modifications. They were specifically interested in whether dogs that knew they had disobeyed would show the guilty look even without clear signals from the owner, and whether dogs that hadn't disobeyed would show it purely in response to those signals. The findings confirmed and extended the original. Whether the dog had actually taken the forbidden food had at best a marginal statistical effect on whether the dog displayed appeasement behavior. The owner's behavior, and specifically whether the owner acted as though they expected to find a problem, was the dominant predictor. One additional finding stood out. Dogs with a history of being repeatedly punished for similar incidents showed stronger appeasement behavior on return than dogs without that history, regardless of whether they had actually done anything. They had learned through experience that this type of homecoming carried risk, so they deployed protective behavior preemptively. In other words, the more you've punished your dog for past incidents, the guiltier they look when you come home, even when they have done absolutely nothing wrong. By now you may be wondering about specific anecdotal evidence that seems to contradict all of this, because almost every dog owner has a story. The dog that went to the spot where they did the thing before being told, the dog that clearly knew, the dog who was looking at the evidence when you walked in. These stories are real, and they deserve a real explanation. What's likely happening in those cases is contextual learning, which is different from guilt. Dogs are extraordinarily sensitive to environmental associations. If a dog has consistently been punished near a particular location or object, they develop a conditioned fear response to that location or object. So a dog who has been punished multiple times near the trash can will show fearful appeasement behavior near that can. Especially when you return. Especially if they've recently been near it. Not because they're thinking, I shouldn't have done that, but because that location and your changed emotional state are now associated in their nervous system with something unpleasant happening. It looks like they know. It feels like they know. The behavioral signals are identical to what we'd expect from guilt, but the internal mechanism is completely different. When you come home and find something has gone wrong, the behavioral guidance from veterinary behaviorists is consistent. Neutral response. Clean it up. Move on. Not because your dog doesn't deserve consequences, but because the consequences available in that moment are not the ones you think they are. The consequence your dog is actually experiencing is your emotional state on arrival, and the lesson being taught is not about behavior, it's about homecomings. The guilty look is one of the most human-feeling moments in the relationship between dogs and people. It's one of the reasons so many owners feel truly understood by their dog, feel that genuine moral comprehension is taking place, feel that their dog participates meaningfully in the ethical life of the household. None of that connection is false, but the mechanism behind it is different from what most people believe. Your dog is not looking guilty because they've reconstructed their past actions, compared them to your expectations, and generated shame. They are reading you with extraordinary sensitivity, detecting signals in your face, body, and voice that you may not even be consciously producing, and responding with behaviors that evolved over thousands of years to reduce social tension and prevent conflict. That is not a lesser thing than guilt. In some ways, it's a more remarkable thing. Your dog is that attuned to you. Every expression, every shift in posture, every change in the emotional charge of the room. They know something is different before you've said a single word. When you understand this, the question that changes is not whether your dog loves you or whether you share a deep connection. You clearly do. The question is what you do at the moment, because what the science is telling you is this. The moment you walk through that door, whatever happened before that moment, your dog is entirely present in this one. They're not thinking about 3 hours ago. They're thinking about right now, about you right now, and whether right now is safe. That is actually the most dog-like thing about the whole situation. They live in the present in a way humans spend years in meditation trying to achieve. And the guilty look, that heartbreaking, funny, completely convincing expression, is not a window into their past. It is a perfect mirror of your present. And once you see it that way, it's very hard to stay angry. If this changed the way you see your dog's behavior, subscribe and leave a comment. Have you ever caught your dog looking guilty for something they definitely didn't do? Tell me below. Next video, why your dog follows you into the bathroom and what the science actually says about what that means for your relationship.